In a world where mysterious gates appeared out of nowhere, humanity was forced to fight back. Those gifted with power became hunters, warriors capable of entering dungeons and slaying the monsters within. But not all hunters were created equal. At the very bottom of this brutal hierarchy stood one man. Sung Jin-woo. Ranked E-class, the weakest of the weak, he risked his life every day for barely enough money to pay his mother's hospital bills. Everyone pitied him. No one believed in him. But fate had something unimaginable waiting just around the corner. On what seemed like a routine raid, Jinwoo's team stumbled into something they were never meant to find. Behind a hidden wall lay a second dungeon, ancient and wrong in every way. The air was cold. The silence was absolute. Stone statues lined the walls like sentinels, and strange runes covered every surface. Then a voice echoed through the chamber, laying out 3 rules that had to be obeyed or death would follow. The hunters had walked straight into a trap designed by something far beyond human understanding. And there was no walking back out. The rules were simple. Worship. Be still. Do not make a sound. But fear makes people irrational. One hunter panicked and broke the silence. The statues moved. What followed was not a battle. It was a slaughter. Hunters with far more power than Jinwoo were torn apart in seconds. He watched people die all around him, helpless, bleeding, barely clinging to life himself. In a final act of desperation, he threw himself into the path of a killing blow meant for another. His body gave out. The darkness swallowed him completely. And then something extraordinary happened. Jinwoo should have been dead. Every doctor agreed. But he woke up in a hospital bed, and the world looked different. Floating screens hovered before his eyes, visible only to him. A system, like something out of a video game, had chosen him as its sole player. It gave him quests. It tracked his stats. And most strangely of all, it promised that if he kept pushing, kept training, kept fighting, he would grow stronger. Not just stronger. Limitless. For the first time in his life, Sung Jin-woo had something no E-class hunter had ever been given. A path forward. Most people would have been terrified by the mysterious system. Jin-woo embraced it. He trained every single day, completing brutal physical quests that pushed his body past its limits. When his muscles failed, he kept going. When the pain became unbearable, he kept going. Other hunters relied on their innate gifts. Jin-woo had none. So he built himself from the ground up, one quest at a time. Slowly, quietly, his stats began to climb. The world still saw him as the weakest hunter in Korea. But beneath the surface, something extraordinary was being forged in silence. The system pushed Jinwoo into dungeons earlier than he was ready for, at least by anyone else's standards. But the results shocked him. Monsters that once made him tremble now fell before him with startling ease. His speed had surpassed what any normal human could achieve. His strength was growing at an impossible rate. And something else was developing inside him, a strange pull toward the dark, a sense that shadows themselves were beginning to answer his will. He was no longer the fragile boy who entered dungeons just to survive. He was becoming something the world did not yet have a name for. The Hunter Association had a ranking system. E, D, C, B, A, and at the very top, S-class. Most hunters were born into their rank and stayed there forever. The system Jinwoo carried recognized none of those limitations. His level kept climbing past anything the association could measure. Other hunters began to notice that something strange was going on with the man they used to call the weakest. He moved faster. He hit harder. He walked out of dungeons that should have killed him without a scratch. The world's understanding of what a hunter could be was about to be completely shattered. The most terrifying ability revealed itself not with fanfare, but in the quiet aftermath of a kill. Jinwoo discovered he could reach into the shadows of the dead and pull something back. Not memories. Not echoes. Actual soldiers. Monsters he defeated could be resurrected as shadow warriors bound to his will, an army that grew with every dungeon cleared. He named his first soldiers. He watched them obey without question. For the first time, the full scope of what the system had made him began to take shape. He was not just a fighter. He was a commander. A king in the making. An E-class hunter who never re-ranked was clearing dungeons at speeds that defied explanation. The Hunter Association could not ignore it any longer. Investigators were assigned. Reports were filed. Powerful figures within the organization began asking uncomfortable questions about how one man could grow so fast without any recorded power-up event. Jin Woo, for his part, said very little. He had no interest in politics or institutions. He had a mother in a hospital. He had a sister to protect. Everything else was noise, but the world does not let powerful things stay quiet for long, and forces far older and far more dangerous than any government were also beginning to pay attention. Jeju Island had been lost. An ant-type dungeon break had transformed the entire island into a nest, and the creatures that emerged were unlike anything hunters had faced before. For S-class raids had already failed. The ants were organized, intelligent, and evolving with terrifying speed. Their queen was producing soldiers that could match Korea's strongest hunters one-on-one. The government was desperate. A fifth raid was being assembled, this time with Japan's most elite hunters joining the effort. It was supposed to be humanity's last coordinated stand. What no one knew yet was that the most important fighter on that island would not be any of the S-class veterans. It would be Sung Jin-woo. From the depths of the ant nest emerged something the raid teams were completely unprepared for. The Ant King was not a beast. It was a warrior, born from the queen at the last moment, shaped by the deaths of every hunter the colony had consumed. It moved like water and hit like a natural disaster. Japan's S-class hunters, the best in the world by reputation, were dismantled one by one. The monster did not roar or rage. It simply fought with cold and terrifying efficiency. And as the survivors scrambled to retreat, Jin-woo descended into the nest alone, his shadow army at his back, ready to face something that had just defeated the world's finest. The fight was unlike anything Jeju had ever witnessed. Two forces, both seemingly beyond human limit, collided with an intensity that split the earth. The Ant King was faster than Jin-woo expected. Stronger. Smarter. For a brief and terrifying moment, it looked like even Jin-woo might fall. But he had spent months forging himself through suffering. He did not break. He adapted. He pushed through wounds that should have stopped him and found a deeper reserve of power he had not yet touched. When it was finally over, Jin-woo stood alone among the ruins. The Ant King was gone, and the world had its first real glimpse of just how far beyond human Sung Jin-woo had truly become. The dungeons, the gates, the monsters. None of it was random. Jin-woo was beginning to piece together a truth far larger than any single raid. Beings called monarchs had been waging a war across dimensions for longer than human civilization had existed. The gates were their invasion routes. The monsters were their armies. And the system that had chosen Jin-woo was not a gift from the universe. It was a weapon, built to counter the monarchs by raising a single human to their level. Jin-woo was not just a strong hunter, he was the instrument of an ancient conflict, and whether he wanted the role or not, the war was already coming for him. Among all the revelations that had shaken Jin-woo's world, none hit harder than the return of his father. Park Kyung-sik had vanished on a classified mission years ago, leaving his family to fall apart in his absence. Now he was back, but something about him was deeply wrong. He was too calm. Too measured. The warmth Jin-woo remembered was buried beneath something cold and deliberate. His father carried knowledge about the system, about the monarchs, and about what Jin-woo was truly becoming. The reunion was not tender. It was a collision between a son desperate for answers and a father carrying truths too dangerous to speak out loud. On the other side of the monarchs stood the rulers, beings of light who had fought to protect intelligent life across countless worlds. They were the ones who built the system. They were the ones who had chosen Jin-woo, not because he was special at birth, but because his will to survive had been unbreakable. The rulers laid out the full picture. The monarchs intended to destroy humanity entirely. The gates would keep opening. The invasions would escalate. And the only way to stop it all was for Jin-woo to grow strong enough to challenge the monarch of destruction himself. For the first time, Jinwoo understood that his personal fight had always been something much larger. Over months of clearing dungeons, surviving impossible fights, and extracting the shadows of the most powerful monsters he had defeated, Jinwoo's army had grown into something staggering. Baru, the Ant King himself, now served at his side. Igris, his first and most loyal knight, stood at his right hand. Tens of thousands of shadows filled the space around him, each one carrying the power it had held in life, now bound to a single will. No army on earth could match this force. No dungeon could threaten him. The question was no longer whether Jinwoo was powerful enough. The question was whether even this would be enough to stop what was coming. The monarchs stopped testing humanity. They invaded all at once. Gates erupted across every continent at the same moment, vomiting monster armies into populated cities without warning. Hunters who had trained their entire lives were overwhelmed within hours. Military forces were useless. Governments collapsed into chaos. The scale of destruction happening simultaneously around the world was beyond any coordinated human response. It was the end, playing out in real time. But somewhere in the middle of that apocalypse, one shadow army began moving with terrifying purpose. Jinwoo was not running, he was hunting. And the monarchs were about to learn what it truly meant to have made him their enemy. Antares was the strongest of all the monarchs, the very embodiment of destruction itself, a being so powerful that entire civilizations had been erased by his arrival. When Jinwoo finally faced him, the air around them crackled with a heat that melted stone. The monarch looked at Jinwoo not with contempt, but with something like recognition. Two forces of immense and unnatural power, standing at opposite ends of the same ancient war. The battle that followed shook the planet. Every shadow in Jinwoo's army was pushed to its absolute limit, and for just a moment, it was genuinely unclear whether the man who had started as the weakest hunter alive had grown powerful enough to end it all. Antares fell. The invasion ended. The gates began to close across the world one by one. Humanity had survived. But survival had a price that no celebration could erase. Jinwoo's shadow army, soldiers who had fought beside him through every battle, had been spent. The world they had protected would never know most of their names. And Jinwoo himself stood at a crossroads that no human had ever faced. The system had one final offer waiting for him. A choice that would determine not just his future, but the shape of the world he had fought so hard to keep alive. He stood alone, and he made his decision. The war was over. The world healed slowly, unevenly, the way worlds always do after catastrophe. Sung Jinwoo returned to something resembling a normal life, or at least the shape of one. His mother recovered. His sister grew up. The hunters who survived moved forward. But Jinwoo carried everything he had seen and lost in a place too deep for words. The boy who had been called the weakest, who had nearly died in a forgotten dungeon, had become the being who saved an entire world. He asked for no monument. He sought no throne. He simply walked forward, as he always had, into whatever came next. And the shadows followed.